You've been in the industry for so long, and I know you've got like tons of stories, but what other stories can you tell us, like from other artists that you've worked with? Let's.
That's wow. That's actually that's a hard on the spot question. And that's part of why I'm actually writing a book at the moment.
Mhm.
Is I'm not that far into it, but while I can still remember all these stories clearly, like I'm trying to, write things down. I mean, I've seen, especially during the time that I worked at Play Studios, I saw everything from, a major label exec stripped naked and robbed at gunpoint in front of the elevator.
What?
I'm not going to name names on the internet, but, I have seen a lot of crazy stuff. That's why I'm writing a book. I mean, if you ask about somebody specifically, I could, but you know what? It's definitely the one thing that doing this full time for so long, I'm not surprised by anything out of anybody anymore. Like I've seen, people do really weird and funny things in pursuit of, whether it's actual monetary currency or whether it's social currency or clout, as the kids say.
Right.
No, I've definitely that's on the spot. That's a tough question. I
do a lot of content that's related to like G Unit or Terror Squad. Like, you have any stories about them?
I've never worked really with anybody from either of those camps. I opened a few shows for Young Buck when I still lived in the South, but I mean that's just getting booked on the same show. You know what I mean, as an opening act. But G Unit and Terror Squad, I really never worked with anybody associated with that camp.
But when you performed on the same bill as Young Buck, did you get to interact with him though?
Somewhat, but it's just the backstage show conversation. What up? Yo, good to meet you. Yo, we gonna rock it tonight. Like, I have found it to that point too. Like, I found just throughout touring and stuff like that and being in different places, like, everybody has their own process of getting in the zone before the show and things like that. And like, that's not always the time to network.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because, everybody, it's A, you're there to do a job, and B, like, even me personally, I have like this kind of thing in the 10 minutes before a show and the 5 minutes before a show and then the 2 minutes before a show. Like, I go through this kind of like mental roller coaster. So, but nah, G Unit and Terror Squad, I mean, a fan of both crews, but I haven't actually worked with anybody from that camp.
You said that you mixed the Nas record, right? Was that for Stillmatic, or what album was that for?
No, that was on a movie soundtrack. That was the song was called The Mecca on 40-Year-Old Version soundtrack.
Oh, okay.
Nas and Ghostface Killer and Styles P. And I guess maybe I have Remy Ma is on that record. I didn't meet Remy. Her verse was sent in via Pro Tools.
But were you there when Nas recorded his verse?
Nas recorded his verse in Cali. And
got you. Okay.
So that song was produced by the Beat Miners. Mm-hmm. And so again, this all goes back to relationships. Is that the beat that Nas ends up picking for the movie soundtrack is produced by the Beat Miners. I have a relationship with the Beat Miners. So they say, hey, who do you want to mix this? And that's how I get looped in. Like, and the reason I'm saying these things is that it's like when they say that, like, you always hear it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Facts.
And that gets misinterpreted sometimes as one day you're going to meet this person who's just going to wave a wand and change everything for you. And that's not what that means. What it means is the more people that you have relationships with and a rapport with, and they can depend on you, the more likely opportunities are going to come your way. So So yeah, like Nas may not even know who I am, but through these other relationships, we're able to. Now I did, I had good communication with the Mass Appeal team, and they were awesome, and all that stuff went great. But yeah, it's all about keeping your relationship, because that's how opportunities are going to come your way. But yeah, that song, the song's called "The Mecca."
Have you ever was such a big fan of somebody, and then you met them in real life, and they turned out to be, kind of disappointing because they weren't as cool as you thought they were? They were an asshole or something like that.
That's a complicated problem for me, because I've met a lot of people that I used to really enjoy their music. And when I dealt with them as people, it wasn't always quite the same. Like I was joking with somebody recently, but like, this is the truth. Like, say I'm on the go and I've got my headphones on and it's Spotify. I'll be listening to a playlist and some song will come on and I'll hear a rapper and I'll be like, man, he owes me $100. For some studio session from 5 years ago. And, then I got to skip that song because I don't want to hear this guy. And then, I'll get a couple more songs down and I'll be like, oh, well, this dude tried to get with my ex years ago. And I don't want to listen to this dude. And I'll skip that song. And there was a time, when there are times I occasionally wish I could just go back to being a hip hop fan, in terms of, I have a very difficult time separating the art from the artist once I've had a bad experience with somebody as a person. It becomes difficult for me after that to enjoy their music quite the same. So like, there are times I wish like I could just go back to where I thought like, everybody was cool and everybody got along. And, but yeah, that sometimes occasionally, there's a lot of songs I skip on Spotify sometimes because I'll hear a voice and be like, nope, not that guy. I remember that time we were on the same show and, he cut into 10 minutes of my stage time or something like that.
And you can't say any names?
I'm not trying to start drama on the internet about something minor that might have happened a decade ago.
Right. But I heard you say that before getting into the industry, you think that it's this like large thing, but then when you get into it, you realize it's fairly small, like 500 people, the same people and stuff.
Like the same 500 to 1,000 people.
Right.
Yes.
So then to add on to your Spotify comparison, you can only do a skip so many times unless you have premium, right? So your premium is like your clout.
Well, I do have premium.
You know what I mean? Your clout and like, your reputation and everything. But it's like you can only be a little petty about it so much because you still got to get work. You still got to work with people, right?
Well, right. And, to be fair, like now on the flip side of that, there's people that I've met who have exceeded my expectations. And, that's people like I mentioned them earlier, the beat miners, like Evil D and Mr. Walt. I work with them very regularly. But like they've really become big brothers to me. And, I like them more as people than I do as producers. And they're some of my favorite producers. And like, people like, Craig G is another guy I consider a big brother that like is just, as much as I liked him as a rapper, like he's even cooler as a person. People like Raz Kaz, El the Sensei of the Artifacts ends up becoming a big part of my career because we did the Solving Cases album together.
Right.
I mixed the Artifacts album with Buck Wild, No Expiration Date. But L's like one of my closest best friends in this industry. Like, and so that's what I mean is that like, yeah, for every bad experience you have where it's like, yo, I rocked with somebody's music and then I dealt with them and, I had a whack experience with them or whatever. For all of those, like, thankfully, if not, this would be a miserable profession. But, thankfully I get experiences that are the opposite of that. So where like, as much as I liked their music, I like them even more as people. And, I've in recent years been able to have, I didn't start out with any kind of mentorship, but in recent years, I've been able to get some mentorship from a lot of just ill veterans. So that makes all the bullshit worth it.
Would you agree that, how people say like it's nothing what it seems? It's a lot of smoke and mirrors for the industry. It's a lot of fakeness.
You know what it is? I mean, maybe not in the Illuminati way that a lot of people think it is. Like I've never seen anybody have a ritual or, stuff like that or nothing like that. But you know what it is that I just think that like a dream is perfect until you actually get to touch it.
Mm.
And then once you get to touch it, you see that like, yeah, it's still your dream, but there's flaws here. You know what I mean? And what I mean by that is that like, for everything that goes well, like 3 things can go wrong. And you end up having to just kind of focus on the things that did go well. So I wouldn't say that like it's not like it seems. The industry, when you stop thinking of the music industry as this like mystical place where like some governing body waves magic wands and decides who does what, and you start looking at it like it's just a series of transactions between individual entities, then it's just like, well, how many good transactions within individual entities can I make in my own favor? Like, it's definitely not like I thought it was. Like there's all kinds of, I really thought that, talent and quality of music played a larger role in what goes on. But, at the end of the day, there's all kinds of brilliant, amazing records that record labels have lost money on because they didn't sell. Whereas this record that's not artistically brilliant, goes through the roof. So I've just always tried to keep my visions and my goals realistic so that I never felt disappointed. That's what I mean. Like I never cared about being on the Grammys. So the fact that I'm not nominated for a Grammy this year, although the Beat Miners De La Soul Pharoah Monch record I mixed was Grammy considered this year, or last year. But saying that to say that like, those benchmarks of success were never necessarily on my radar. So I don't feel disappointed having not reached them. I wanted to have my own operation that grew a little bit over time and to be able to still keep doing this as I get older. So as long as that maintains, then I'm happy, as long as we're still growing.